Are esports becoming bigger than Major League Sports? You got some athletes making over $500,000 a month, and you also have events like League of Legends, Overwatch, breaking record numbers of viewers on Twitch and in attendance. I mean, some of these are even hotter than concert tickets. Esports is definitely on the rise, and Alt F4 is back.
But where we at, number man self? But where we at?
I got game, my aim is true, bells and straight winning it. From FP to RTS, I'm all into it. I seen your words online, now it's game time. We all know that you're just talked out, you're all mine. LOL, BF, Madden's all the same. A serial killer committed murder inside the game. Now you're beaten, yellow now, player no more. Back to the minors, game over, off F4.
All right, I am Jailer Rockin' out here with my man Joshua. What's up, man?
What's up, brother? How have you been?
I've been good, man. I've been keeping tabs on what's been going on in esports, man, and it's like I'm still on the outside, man. You know, I'm not an esports gamer. I'm not an esports expert. So I come to people to, tell me, educate me on what's going on, man. So I'm glad to have you back doing this show with us.
It's good to be back. Good to be back, and it seems like esports, since our last episode we did a while back, has grown into this billion-dollar industry, and it just keeps on rolling.
Yeah, I mean, it really is crazy. And I just want to say before we go into our topics that we're sponsored by the ObsoleteGamer Network. We have a whole bunch of podcasts that you can find on Podbean, on iTunes, on Android, all for free. None of that, stuff where we're trying to trick you or nothing. So go check us all out, and we really appreciate you listening to us. And if you like our content, hit us up with a subscribe so you can find all our episodes, because we have a lot of old backlog episodes that don't expire because the topics are more general. But to get into just programming, I mean, it's been a while since we talked. A lot of things have happened, but it's crazy because, before we started recording, we were talking about how back in the day, no one thought that you would really be able to make a lot of money. I mean, technically, esports has been running for a long time. Like, we were just talking about Fatality, but then it seemed like there was like a lull in it where, like, they still had competitions, but then you had like controversies where some places not paying out money, places being kind of shady, not knowing where you could go. And then all of a sudden, like, you had this like explosion. And next thing you know, you had stadiums full of people watching StarCraft, League of Legends, stuff like that. Just like over the last couple of years, what are your observations of the changes in esports?
I feel like the market's growing still. It's no longer in an infancy phase, but it's not quite yet a adolescent. So it's kind of like in that awkward 2 to 3 year baby phase still, where a lot of the players are just coming into the market and not players as in actual people playing games, more so than big companies coming in, trying to get a pulse for what works and what doesn't work, marketing-wise. And I feel like there's, I would say, like, let's say if you look at a pie and you were to go ahead and like divide up a pie into 4 squares, I would say, or 4 slices, I would say that we haven't even gotten through the first slice yet, technically. I feel like there's a lot of room for growth. And there's a lot of gray areas still, but there could be, I think within the next 3 years, you start to see more fleshing out of what the esports model will become for different genres,
Yeah, I'm just curious. Do you think that in the end, you're going to almost have to do a copy of like how they do Major League Sports, where you're going to have a league with some control? Because like right now, you can have people jumping from one place to another, and there might be 1 or 2 organizations that are big, but then there's a bunch of others that you're not so sure about. Do you think in the end it's going to have to be like some kind of unification where it's like, okay, this is a league for this game or this type of game, like RTS, FPS, things like that, fighting games?
Well, what I'm starting to notice, and this has been the trend ever since League was dubbed the most successful esports model, I'm starting to notice that maybe developers will start to close their titles off to grassroots type events, like maybe not sponsor them. So for example, you could take the League model where there's an ecosystem within itself, of 4 different branches of regions that play and have player transactions where they actually buy contracts and sell contracts for players, or trade players. And then you have like the FGC, where it's kind of like in a weird spot where there's still a portion of the whole grassroots, anybody could enter and play. And that's kind of what I still think makes the FGC style of esports unique, is because there's not this like requirement of having to come in and require your, for example, so for League to have a team, you have to pay a certain amount of money. I don't know what the franchising fee is now, but I'm gonna guess, like, let's say for example it's $1 million. Like, imagine if you and 5 of your friends wanted to play professional League of Legends and you wanted to compete against the best people, you'd have to pay $1 million. Not everybody has that kind of money.
Yeah, or get that sponsorship either.
So you won't be exposed to playing against, the elite level competition, the top 1%. In fighting games and in fighting game tournaments, it's completely different. You pay your $100, let's say, for a tournament, $65 entry, $30 for a game plus tax, and your first match could be against Daigo Mahara, who's a Street Fighter legend. That could literally be the first match you play. And it's funny, it's got an almost, like, I almost want to say it's still got part of the arcade feel to it, but less arcade now and more esports. So I would say, yeah, I think what we're going to see in the future is more money dictating who and what plays what. So you'll start to see more of the League model, because I remember Rick Fox, back when he bought a League team, he bought his roster spot. I remember the first thing he said was, well, I don't like that my team, his team finished last. Echo Fox finished last that year. And he didn't like the notion that he spent all this money buying the spot and that his team would be relegated to Challenger Series if they lost the next series that they played, and would get relegated out of the league. So they worked on a relegation system where the last 2 teams in the whole league would face the 2 top challenger teams, and if those last 2 teams in that league lost, they got relegated out into like the minor leagues.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to think that what you're going to see is more invitationals for fighting games, similar to what you would say like a Intel Master Series would be like. And a lot of money will dictate, the ecosystem. It's just like any sport. It'll become a league-driven sport.
I think what people don't really understand is that, like, when you're comparing it to major sports, there's sports where, like, let's say football, for instance, that's supposed to be like America's greatest sport. Okay, so we know that the quarterback is the top. Everyone wants to talk about the quarterback. And then you have some splashy positions like wide receiver. But then, even someone like Gronk comes along and makes tight end important. Running back used to be crazy back in the days with Walter Payton, things like that. But nowadays, running backs aren't thought of that much. Then you got the kicker and punter, where most of the time they're a joke until you need that field goal to win the game. I think that almost in esports, you have the same thing, where it's like in some games, maybe like a Dota, each person on that team, you're grouping together. You have to have your skills. But then in fighting games, it's like someone can technically come in and then maybe beat someone that's on top. But overall, it's about consistency, because that's what you see with a lot of people like that want to hate on esports. They have this idea that, oh, well, I could just practice and log in and then beat the best. And it's like, maybe you could get a lucky round if you really, really practice, but the idea is consistency. It's like a batting average in baseball. Someone could probably walk up there, and if they really practice and train, hit a home run, but that doesn't mean that over, 100 and something games, you're going to have a good batting average unless you're really good at this sport.
So the easiest way for me to put it is, so I come from I guess an old school fighting game mentality, at the same time kind of like the new school esports stuff. The anomaly for us is Sonic Fox. So if you don't know who Sonic Fox is, Sonic Fox is a multiple world champion in different games. He is a really good Dota DOA player. He is a really good Skullgirls player. He is a former Injustice 1 world champion at EVO, Mortal Kombat X world champion at EVO. And he's always a perennial top player, always in every game that he plays. And just now he's one of the best players in Dragon Ball Z Fighters. And a lot of people credit it to natural talent, and I would say that his natural talent at one point in time or another wasn't solely just how good he was coming out of the gate, more so than I think the practice time that he puts in. And I believe at one point in time, I'm almost positive before he went to college, he was probably logging in anywhere between 80 to 100 hours a week.
Wow.
And that's not just you know, let's say for example, just him playing just sets. That would be him playing and doing practice mode and finding different things with different characters, exploring other characters. I mean, at one point in time or another, he used to play in Mortal Kombat X, if I'm not mistaken, he played like 5-6 characters at the highest level, and that's how he would win, you know. And then obviously the notion of picking the top tier characters, the ones with the most favorable matchups, is the smartest thing to do if you're playing in an esports type of environment. You know, you can play for fun and enjoy a character, or you can play to win and pick up, you know, the effective characters to win. And that's something that Sonic Fox has never shied away from. I would definitely say anybody can pick up a controller and play, but understanding how to maximize your time and get the best results and become consistent is what makes you great. And that's something that Sonic Fox has done. He's always consistently been great. I never seen him really place anywhere below 5th place at a tournament in any game that he plays.
Yeah, I mean, like in golf, you have people who can make money and be semi good, but when you look at the rating for the PGA, they're like 100, and it's like,
Yep.
but when you know the Jordan Spieths of the world who are like up there, and then Tiger Woods who is trying to make a comeback and things like that, like those names because those are like top 10, top 20, maybe up to top 50, but there's a lot of people after that number that are decent, but there's a difference between being decent and even being on teams and then cracking that top 20. Some people may never do that, or maybe they do it once and then they'll never return.
Yeah. I would say I think the work ethic is what separates the top 5% at any tournament. Out of 500 people, the people who work the hardest usually are in that 5% at the end of the event. You know, in that top 8, for example, in a fighting game tournament, those are the people that separate. And you could be a grinder. You can be somebody who logs in 100 hours a day or a week or something like that, and it still won't equate to results because the person hasn't figured out yet how to be efficient with that time and how to maximize it. So there is a lot of X factors that go into it to becoming good at any type of game. Repetition, practice, and then even coming out with theories and game theories outside of the box and trying to figure out, a potential way to, let's say, lock down an opponent and jail them out completely, where they have, one option and the one option, and you can continuously abuse them having to guess that one option, So that's kind of like the one side to it. The other side is it's kind of funny. When I was coaching a friend of mine named White Boy at CEO, not this CEO, but the last CEO for Injustice, I started to notice, and it's gonna sound really funny. When I was doing boxing and some Muay Thai, I picked up on rhythm patterns on how people play, and it's funny how people move to a certain rhythm, and you could sense how either they're in fear of certain things or how they're going to be aggressive towards other things. And during that time, like, it was weird. My whole way of coaching him was not necessarily a X's and O's. Okay, look, this is here, this is that. More so than understanding how to kind of keep his mind focused and not overwhelm him with a bunch of information. So the psychology is another big thing in fighting games, and I think that actually gets underwritten the most. It's the hardest thing to see. It's a thing that not everybody will see, and the common eye will definitely not notice.
Yeah, and I think that what happens is you get a lot of people, especially people who want to be a critic for whatever reason that they have. Those are the people that are probably not going to try hard, or they're not trying correctly, because it's like someone, like you were saying, you can sit there and play a game for 80, 100 hours a week, and that you'll see some of these people say, "Oh, I play X game so long, I could be as good." It's like, but what are you doing? Are you actually trying the actual practice methods? Are you doing the right thing? Are you learning all the characters? Are you learning all these other things? Do you take it seriously? And I think the thing is that if your first action is to try and mock or attack something, then you're never going to be good, because it's like, I'm sure way back in the day before sports, you could make money in sports. There's people that told you, what are you going to go out there and play basketball for hours or play football for hours? You're never going to become anything. But if that's the person sitting in, on the field or on the court, and they're shooting thousands of free throws, thousands of 3 points, that's because you care about it. You take it seriously. If you're just like, oh, I'm playing, I should be good, then no, yeah, you're not gonna be. You're gonna be at the bottom of that pot.
Well, yeah, no. Usually, people who don't understand something, they'll tend to mock it. I remember back, my grandfather told me that the old football players from the 70s, they used to have actually summer jobs because the NFL pay wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So you had to, like, let's say, for example, Manny Fernandez working at a bank. Like, it's crazy. He's a bank teller, and he also plays football on the undefeated Dolphin team. Like, what? Like, come on. You know, every sport and everything that usually becomes a trend usually has a period where you play for the passion, then you start playing towards some money, and then eventually you will get paid money. Right now I feel like we're in that leeway of some money to paid money. There's a lot of people who are getting good salaries and good opportunities to work for certain companies to sort of negate not getting paid a salary. And I feel like those jobs will eventually become more commonplace. But at the same time, I don't see there hasn't been a player yet outside of like a fatality that has developed their own brand and really, like, I think maybe the closest thing now might be Ninja. I don't know if you've watched Ninja. He's a Fortnite guy. He seems to have really grasped the branding of his own niche. And this is a guy now that every time he streams, he gets almost 100,000 viewers or upwards of beyond 100,000 viewers. Dr. Disrespect was also a really good streamer, not really an esports guy. But I feel like the esports players have an advantage that just a regular streamer might not have, but they haven't gotten the personality or the ability to market themselves yet. And I feel like that's where they're lacking the most. If you add self value and you present yourself as a product that competes at a really high level and places really well and is always a perennial, championship contender, and then at the same time also has a following of 50,000 people who watch him every time he turns on his stream, that makes you twice as valuable. And I haven't seen anybody do that, and they don't do it on a consistent level. And some of those players are getting paid salaries, and they're getting paid, let's say, for example, $6,000-$7,000 a month. But people like Ninja are making, I think I heard him making $500,000 in a month off of subs and donations and everything, so. And then now look at all the other opportunities. He had Drake, the singer Drake, as one of his play guests one time.
Yeah.
He's had what's the other one? The oh my god, I forgot his name. The mouse looking dude, Dead Mouse. He had Dead Mouse as one of his guests. He had Juju Smith-Schuster, a football player, that's actually one of his guests, and every time he streams, he gets 100,000 plus.
And that
So
seems to be the
imagine,
thing. Yeah, yeah, because
yeah,
it's like with so many people, and that's another thing how you know it's blowing up because you have all these games like on You Don't Get the Show. We were talking about how all these MLB, NBA football players are playing Fortnite, and
yep,
it's like you're like before that. I mean, you go farther back. First, they were making fun of anything that if you played games. Then you had some people kind of jump on the bandwagon. It's kind of like when Hollywood found out that there's a lot of gamers. All of a sudden, you had all these fake people saying, "Oh, I play X game, I play Game Boy or something," and you're like, "Who
yeah,
cares?" But now you have legit people who are playing these games, and they love playing these games,
yep,
and they're stars. From celebrity in sports to music to movies, and it's crazy. But as
yep.
the point you were saying about marketing yourself, do you think some of that could be just? I mean, it's not completely a stereotype, but it's kind of a stereotype that sometimes gamers have an issue with being social, and that it's kind of like maybe the really quiet sports person who they go up for interview and they just say, oh, we had a good match and the coach was great and teammates were great, and then they walk off. And then you have the other athlete who comes up and he is up there having like a concert or a show or a comedy show when they do an interview. Maybe that's the thing, is that some of these people are just not that outward, because to stream and do all that stuff, you really do have to have that outward personality. I guess if you're really, really good, you can sit there on the stream and just be really, really quiet and just play. But everything I see, the streamers that make money, you got to have something. You got to have that little pot where someone wants to watch not just the gameplay, but watch you as well.
So as people stream, you you have to be more than just a good player. You have to be engaging. And what I notice is a lot of the high level players that I've talked to in the past, the older ones tend to be more socially vocal and outward, while the younger kids are more bubbled. Like it seems to be like a lot of them are quiet, recluse. They don't really talk. Lately, I've noticed there's been strides, in the NetherRealm side, like the NRS guys. A lot of the top players are starting to stream often, and they're getting more accustomed to streaming and stuff. So I think it's the initial fear and the first step for some of them. And it's funny. I wouldn't say these people are socially awkward. That's actually the wrong way to view them.
Mm.
I would say that they're normal people that haven't been put on a level to where they could have a platform to actually voice their opinion, and their opinion matter. And I think that's the biggest fear. I feel like it's not so much the fear of them talking to people, more so than them talking to people and being like, this is my platform and it's a big platform, and I have, even if it's 50 people watching me, like 50 people are watching you stream and view your opinions and stuff like that, and how things are in a game, let's say, or even in like the real world, what's going on. And at the same time, some of them might have the fear of being judged, physical appearance wise, the way they talk, their opinion of certain things, topics. So when the streamer goes out there to put on a show and to entertain, they are more susceptible to being attacked, and I feel like that kind of turns off people from doing that. But at the end of the day, if you feel like you can add value to a person's day by either entertaining them or helping them, let's say, for example, you're playing a game and you did something that they hadn't seen, that might give that person the enthusiasm to say, oh man, let me turn this on and try that out. And indirectly, you change that person's day where he might have been having a bad day, the person did. And by doing whatever you did and showing them a particular play, you cause them to turn on a game and distract themselves from whatever type of day they're having. So even in a quiet way, you could still influence somebody to do something. And I feel like streamers overlook that in fear of being judged. I feel like that's the main issue that I'm seeing.
Now, one of the stories that I wanted to bring up to you is like what you were saying before with Ninja. There was on Game Rant, they were talking about how esports players could end up making as much as major sports, and they were talking about how Ninja, like you said, earns a $500,000 amount for like streaming and things like that. And then it's crazy because further down the article it says that it started out esports started out as a niche sport, and that now the Olympics are even interested in esports, which is just awesome, I think. And I mean, just what do you think of just the fact that at one point, just being in the gaming industry, period, not even an esports player, people thought that that was a dead end. I remember, early 2000, it was like, oh, why are you wasting your time with games? It's never going to be anything. And it's like, you have companies like Alienware who were dedicated to making computers so you could play high end games. You have all these accessories that you can buy, these game companies. I mean, it's rivaling sometimes movies, where movies push their release date because of a game, and now you have gamers who can stream and earn money by competing. Just overall, the potential to make money is just incredible.
Um, I've said it before in the past. Anything worth doing is worth pursuing, and sometimes your passion for something is, what continues to drive people to do things. So in the model of esports, you know, I see them. I see the value of the entertainment it provides. Not necessarily so much more as, let's say, for example, like for football. Uh, Back when I was younger and I was a kid, we used to watch a football game and we would see Barry Sanders do some stupid juke, like just throw the guy off, completely off and miss the whole tackle. And you go out there and you emulate that. You'd go out there and play and you'd emulate the person you'd see on the screen. Esports is no different, you know, except I think the accessibility is easier, whereas, like they see, let's say, for example, you're a big kid and you don't have the agility Barry Sanders has, you're not going to be able to go out there and do that move, let's say. That doesn't stop you from picking up a mouse and a keyboard and going online and practicing what you see Faker doing in mid lane, where he jukes the shit out of somebody and causing them to miss all their skill shots, and then he kills them for it. Like that. So the accessibility is there for people for the average person to, if they want to invest their time, become good at something. Maybe not great, because there's still a lot of things that go involved in it, but I feel like the accessibility of the person sitting in front of the keyboard and challenging themselves to try to do something that somebody who has mastered that it's a easier access point right now. It's not an easier access point to get to the level that they're at, but it's an ease of access to play the vehicle that allows you to get to that level.
Yeah, and we've seen where there's like large, prize purses for the top end of the competition. But what's interesting to me, and I just wonder if that's something you think that you'll see, is kind of like for the NBA, you have the G League, which used to be the D League for Development League. And those players there, I think the salary they said was only something like 50,000, or maybe even was a little bit less than that. But the thing is that these guys get to play, they get to practice, they're on a team, and they can end up getting either a full contract or a two-way contract with a professional team. Do you think that what may end up really bringing together esports, where you'll see even a bigger explosion of gamers, is not so much the top end where you look at someone, you're like, oh, this person's making almost $1 million, but maybe where a person can just go steadily and say, hey, I made $1,000 here. Because I mean, you consider with the gig economy and something, there's a large segment of the population that is never going to crack 50,000 a year in wages. So it's like everyone can pretend like everyone's going to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars in their normal jobs, but we see, even with the economy and job market going down, wages still aren't there. So if you can get to the point where you can maybe do some streaming and make the same, maybe equivalent to, let's say, $15 to $20 an hour, but anywhere. That's the craziest part, because it's like, yeah, maybe if you're in LA, Miami, New York, $15 an hour isn't really anything. But you can play that same game. I mean, you still have to travel, but you can play these games. You can stream in Alabama, where you can rent a house for $200 a month. So do you think that that's the key, is getting to the point where you can make these lower end salaries consistently and make it a full-time thing?
I think that is kind of where everything's going to go to now. The first step was to kind of front load a lot of big contracts, I guess, on key players that are marketable or popular or have history. And then I think the next step would be to have lower end, not lower end. It sounds bad when I say lower end. It's the only way I could phrase it, I guess you could say, for right now. But lesser known or lesser familiar brands like a BXA, for example, eventually be able to provide financial means of, let's say even if they just pay a player as a salary contract $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month, just to help them facilitate and start up their own stream as they become professional players. I feel like that's when you know that the ecosystem of esports has hit the second slice of pie. The third slice of pie will be when where like the top end players are making $2 to $3 million a year, getting paid really good salaries, and then you have, like, the lesser known organizations playing their players like a $32,000 a year salary plus a benefit here and there. I feel like that's when esports will be in a better place and more flushed out. Right now, as it stands, it hasn't even begun to crawl still, in my opinion. There's still a lot of room for a lot of growth, but I feel like the people who are investing into this have to figure out what their return on investment will be. What is the gain, And maybe the gain is similar to what football and all that other stuff provides, which is advertising time. I feel like they need to get like a Budweiser, for example, and have Budweiser run commercials and pay for advertising space, and then hopefully drive up the numbers of esports as well. So maybe that's where the next thing is I guess informing the general public, getting the general public to buy into this and to invest time in watching it and being a spectator, not even necessarily playing. Like, the cool thing about esports is people can play the game, yes, but not everybody can be Barry Sanders in football. So you watch Barry Sanders play football, and then as you watch Barry Sanders play football and everybody else watches Barry Sanders play football because you don't know the next time he's going to do a ridiculous play, you have advertisement spaces that get sold. So I feel like that's kind of where esports is at. Like right now, the ecosystem is kind of like, you have your blue chip companies like an Intel and AMD, which are big multi-billion dollar companies. And then you have your lower tier, which will be like an NVIDIA, and then the lower tier after that. And it's cool, but it's all companies that still only facilitate one niche, whereas they have not hit a complete global market for this particular style. Sure, Intel is a global market company because everything has an Intel chip, but not everything has an Intel gaming processor in it, So I feel like that's where the growth has to come in the viewership, the entertainment. I think streamers facilitate more viewership than the actual esports models still. So I feel like that's the gateway, is to have better streamers. The better streamers will educate the people to watch the other higher level content and actually enjoy what they're watching. So I feel like the streamers are the gateway, and the sooner people realize that, the more money those people will make, and it'll easily in turn cause people to not only watch the streamers but watch the actual professional leagues play. So I feel like it's like a two-step process still that hasn't been realized.
Well, I think that it kind of seems like it makes sense to just continue to push almost towards the major sports model because, like, for instance, another article that I was looking at was talking about how Overwatch League Grand Final tickets are hotter, selling more than Elton John and Drake tickets, and they were saying that the Overwatch League Grand Finals have sold out the Barclays Center, which is 20,000 seats, and we've known about League of Legends tournaments that gets millions of viewers. I think it was only 2 years ago they were saying that it was beating the championship football numbers as far as viewers and even Major League Baseball. It wasn't beating NBA or football yet, but it was making those strides. And the thing is that going back to what you were talking about, like with Barry Sanders, when you go to some of these places, the football stadiums, you'll see they'll have like little areas where kids can like throw football or practice or play around and stuff like that. And same thing with baseball and basketball. They'll have like a little court outside. I know that where the Cleveland plays, they have an area outside where you can play basketball. And if you think about it, all those things can be used in esports. Because if you think about it, when you watch the NBA or let's say the Super Bowl, look at the commercials. GoDaddy has been doing commercials forever. What really does a domain hosting company have to do with football? Nothing. But the fact is that they're like, hey, we can get numbers. We got Danica Patrick. We'll put her up there. And they've said they've gotten people that signed up because of that. So, yes, it's true that selling the actual things related to gaming like controllers, keyboards makes sense. But if you think about it, it's not like football is coming down and saying, hey, buy this Wilson football, buy these pads, buy this helmet. It's like, sure, they could, but if you want to play it, you're going to buy that anyway. So you could still put it up there and be like, oh, Wilson is the official football for NFL. But they're selling Pepsi. They're selling Budweiser, like you said. Yep. So I think the key is that all these places got to realize, wait a minute, these gamers are the same ones that go watch Star Wars, Marvel movies, Netflix. They eat Doritos and stuff like that. So, yes, we can sell this side product that is specific to the game. But the real key is to sell what everyone else has in the refrigerator, in their houses, or in their cars right now.
Yeah. It was funny a while ago. I remember there was a really good peripheral company called Mad Cats. And every event I would go to, I would see them selling joysticks. And like the first couple events I would go to, you couldn't buy the joysticks because they would sell out instantly. And then over time, I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. I eventually got one. And then I started to notice that their booth always had joysticks. I'm like, well, how many fucking joysticks at $200 can you sell and be a profitable company?
Yeah.
And not branch out into other things. And sure enough, they went defunct. They were spending a ton of money on just sponsoring players to push more joysticks. And then they eventually came out with the computer peripheral line, and I think everybody was like, oh, that's the death of them because they came out with that and it didn't do so good. And I'm like, it didn't do so good because of what? Like, did they not think it through? And then I look at the lineup, and it's like you have the Rat 1 mouse, the Rat 2 mouse, the Rat 3 mouse, the Rat 4 mouse. And it's like you got 5 different mice, and they all are just a slight better version of each other, and you're selling them, so you're cannibalizing your business. Why not just come out with one fucking mid-grade one and one top-of-the-end one, and avoid all the production costs of that? And then eventually, I think they had production problems. They had to switch factories. That cost them a lot of money. And then they went defunct. And I think now they're coming back. I'm not sure, but it's like I'm like looking at the FGC, and I'm just like, how many fucking joysticks can you guys sell and be profitable? And how many people are going to buy multiple joysticks? There are very few people that are aficionados for joysticks. I like cigars. I smoke cigars. I collect them. And I have them there. But I have them there for a specific purpose. I let them age. Technology doesn't get better when it ages. So that PS3 joystick that you bought, and then you bought 3 more like it, guess what? When the PS4 came out, you can't use them.
Yeah.
So what did you collect? Artwork? You just could have just had the same artwork printed out. Find some print shop, print it out, cut the holes, and just replace it. You know.
And not to mention, at least when it comes to PC, how many times have I been to someone's home and what controller do they have connected to their PC? The Xbox One controller or the 360
Exactly.
before that one. I mean, I don't see that many people saying I have to get this particular joystick. Now, yes, if you know that you want to go into gaming or professional gaming and you say, "Hey, I need to know how to play on this kind of stick," then fine. But that still doesn't mean that your audience is going to all be like, "Hey, let me get this expensive thing." They're going to be like, "No, I'm fine with connecting the Xbox controller." Or the person that has console games, they're going to be like, "It already comes with controllers. Do I really need to get another controller?" And if I do, I'm going to get maybe one, maybe two, so someone else can play. But that's it. And then, like you said, at that point, you kind of run out. Like, how is that sustainable, especially when you're coming out with 50 different versions of it?
Exactly. So that's where then I've kind of seen, like, for example, like a company like Razer, they always offer slightly different products to what the previous product was. And I sort of like their model. I think their price point is absurd for what you get. I think you really just pay for the name. It's not necessarily even the quality, because they're using cherry switches, and to be honest, cherry switches, that's not their proprietary stuff. It's not stuff that Razer came up with. Cherry switches have been around since the arcades. So when you're paying for a micro switch keyboard at, let's say, the Black Widow Chroma, you're paying $170 for it. And then let's say, for example, some other X brand company is, offering the same type of keyboard with cherry switches at $79. It's like, I mean, I'll pay for the Razer because I just like to keep everything kind of uniform and looking the same. But if I was just getting into this, I would be like, I'll just take the $79 keyboard and run with it, because cherry switches are universal. They all have the same 10,000 click guarantee. The Razer's cherry switch is no different than the other cherry switch on that keyboard. So I feel like developers have kind of, like, hardware developers kind of gotten away from being reasonable with their prices. It's like, oh, okay, cool, this is a glowy keyboard and it has a spectrum of 192 different colors. That's cool. I am not going to see all those colors. I'm just gonna run it in blue.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
What do you think of these colleges and offering not only esports teams, but game development courses, esports related courses, also teams? Another article was talking about how the Harrisburg University of Science and Technology has their own esports team, and the varsity team, they get full athletic scholarships that provide housing and a stipend. So it's like it's getting to the point where we're seeing it in the collegiate level where I mean, a stipend, that's kind of interesting, because in collegiate sports, the NCAA, they don't really offer you that. They give you like a meal plan, but that's it. You don't get a stipend. And of course, you get housing and you get your education. But now you're seeing this in esports. And also, just what do you think of like all these companies like paying and getting their own teams? Like, I mean, Miami Heat has an esports team, and you're just seeing this. So just from the college level on up to where now companies are saying, I want an esports team as well. What do you just think of that revelation?
I think it's a good step in the right direction to ingrain a culture, a new emerging culture. I know it's not going to be easy for them at the beginning. Anything like that is always met with resistance, because you'll have the naysayers say, "Oh, that's not an athletic event. Why are they getting an athletic scholarship?" And it's like, well, there's different types of athletes. This is a mental athlete. And I feel like that's the distinction: the physical athlete as opposed to the mental athlete.
Like chess.
Yes, yes, like chess. Actually, I never understood why nobody ever got chess scholarships. That's
That's true.
that's actually a an interesting one. I feel like this is the first version of a chess scholarship. I like it. I think it's good. I think it's good to grow a scene and a emerging market. I think it's a good idea. I don't know much else about it. I know that before everything like this was sort of viewed as a club team, and it was kind of like a club activity. So I think it's cool that they are rewarding people for it, but at the same time, my biggest worry about it is what will entail, for example, like what type of education they will get at the same time as practicing 30 to 40 plus hours a week. That's my biggest worry. I don't know. I like it. I think it's a good step. I have some questions about it still. Um, I'm also curious to know if it's only for, let's say, for example, profitable games like League that have huge followings.
Yeah.
So far, I think that's more or less the thing. Um, so in that regard, I'd like to see it, if anything, be more open to not just particular genres, more so than a merit of, hey man, this guy is an amazing Street Fighter V player. Let's put him under scholarship and let's bring him in and then send him out to competitions.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's more interesting. As a matter of fact, it was funny. I didn't get to read the article, but I got to read the headline of the article. And the U.S. Army, or one of the armed forces, was actually holding its own interbranch Street Fighter V tournament
Oh
across the
wow.
whole branch. So yeah, that was actually really interesting to see a government-run military defense system actually running a competitive gaming tournament to crown the best Street Fighter V player in the whole military branch. So that was actually really interesting.
It's like the old school Army versus Navy football game, but this time with Street
Yeah,
Fighter.
there you go. Yeah. So I feel like that's, I feel like people, at the end of the day, I feel like people will relate in a common sense to games. And I feel like that's the key, and I feel like that should be the selling point, and then everything else comes with it. You know? There's no way a regular Joe will relate to a faker playing at that level. You have to have a common ground and kind of, lure in the viewer to watch. And that's why I feel like I feel like the streamers do the best job of that. I feel like the streamers relate to the person, and the person engages to watch that particular streamer and their game, and then they go, man, I've watched a lot of this, and then damn, I wonder what other players look like when they play and what they do. And then you get that lure in. It's kind of like kid in a candy shop. They see from the outside and they look, and there's like, oh man, it looks pretty cool in there, I think I want to see it. And then they get to the door and it's like, oh man, I open the door, they smell the candy, and then they go in, and then they just start looking at everything else. So I feel like the streamers need to be the bigger picture to lure in people to watch the other niche version of this. Technically, this is a niche within niches, if you look at it that way.
I was curious about what you mentioned about going for the more popular games because did you ever play the DC MOBA Infinite Crisis?
I didn't play it. I know it got shut down, which is kind of disappointing. It seems to me, it's going to sound weird when I say this. It seems to me that the DC titles don't translate well. And I'm starting to notice that on almost every single thing they do. So, for example, their movies have not translated well. Within the NetherRealm series of games that they've done, Mortal Kombat gets a really, really diehard fan base. And it always seems to draw pretty good numbers. regardless of, iterations of the game being different, always seems to draw some solid numbers. And then when Injustice 1 came out, the first year it drew a pretty good amount, but by the end of that first year, it was already dead. Not a lot of people were playing it. Not a lot of people liked the game. So then Injustice 2 flash forward, everybody starts it off, everybody's enjoying the game. Oh man, game's good. Then all of a sudden it's like same shit hits a wall. And I had a debate with one of the casters, and he's kind of whatever that does casting on this. And my debate with him was, why do NetherRealm games in general struggle with retention, and more so this particular game, which was technically the improvement to the last game, and it fixed everything that was wrong with the last game somewhat, but created a whole new set of problems at the same time. So, and then what I started to feel is that as I play Injustice, the first game I really enjoyed it. It was fucking broken. Not even gonna lie. It was broken. There was dumb things in it, but it was enjoyable. And I always had a fun factor to it. And then I play this one, and it's supposed to be the better version of it, because you always say the second version of the first version tends to get better in games. As I play this game, I feel like it's soulless. It has no soul. Same like the DC movies outside of Wonder Woman, they haven't had any soul. There's no soul to the movie.
And strange enough, their animation department does well.
They nail it. I don't know why. I don't get it. But for some reason, Injustice 2, and it's showing in the numbers of people that register for it, the player retention is not what it is. And then the crazier thing is, the FGC as a whole has grown in popularity and grown in population, and people going to tournaments, and you're getting record number of people's coming in every other tournament. A new tournament reaches a new high, and yet you're seeing the same numbers you saw in 2011 for NetherRealm games. 500-600 people, close to 1,000, but not quite. Then the next year, the drop off is like, cut that shit in half. 300 people, 200 people. And it's the same pattern. And I'm like, why isn't there any growth? But yet everywhere else, some games may have lost, but then other games grew in popularity and gained those people. So why is it that the DC Warner Brothers brand game continues to have the same trend line where there's no growth and no player retention?
Well, see, I want to know what killed Infinite Crisis, because I actually liked it. I mean, and as I said, I'm not an esports player. I'm not a pro gamer. So for all I know, the mechanics were bad or something like that. But I like the idea of being able to play that type of game. You was in DC Heroes. I remember playing as Joker, and he had things like, he'd throw a present that would explode, and he'd shoot the boxing glove at you and things like that. I thought it was pretty fun. Yes. Was it pretty much just like League? Sure. But a lot of games were copying that. It's funny because there's another article recently where League of Legends won a settlement, a judgment against Mobile Legends, which I've also played on Android, which again, it does look like a copy of League, but then again, I mean, League came from kind of like a copy of Dota. So it's like, I guess maybe there's a difference between, really copying it and semi-copying it. I mean, I don't know. And then you got Heroes of the Storm. So I don't understand like what would make, for instance, Infinite Crisis like die out. Like I'm gonna have to go, like look into that, because it's like it seemed like, oh, at least you'd have people. Maybe it won't be as big as the others, but not die out.
It might have been marketing.
Yeah.
I didn't play it. Sort of watched it. I thought it might have had potential. It's funny, actually. I was gonna look it up and see if it was still active, and I was gonna just give it a shot, just to try something new, just for fun. And it was dead, so I was kind of like, oh, okay. And I noticed the gameplay reviews were typically like, it was okay. When you're going up against a market like that, where you have two juggernauts like Dota and League, you kind of either have to be a completely different game, sort of like what Heroes of the Storm is. Heroes of the Storm's a little bit different. Actually, it's a lot different. and the idiosyncrasies of certain maps. Not every map plays the same. I think that's where Blizzard went right with the game, where not every map is the same.
Yeah.
You know, you get this repetitive trend line of chess in Dota and League, whereas in HOTS you get kind of like this like Chinese checkers. I like to call it Chinese checkers, where it's kind of random.
Yeah, you can tell because some people do not know how to do a different encounter in one of HOTS maps where where the key is encounters and you still have people running around like they're doing a regular laning, and it's like, no, laning doesn't work in this map.
Nope.
So you do see where some people are just and same thing with picking the right characters. Some characters just work so much better in certain maps.
Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of like, I think that's where HOTS shines. Now, I notice HOTS hasn't really caught on, and I think it's because it's too different from the status quo. But I feel like it's an enjoyable game. I've had a lot of fun playing it, more than I had fun playing League. I feel like the skill requirement isn't as strict. That's probably why I enjoy it, because I'm not really going to invest a bunch of time into last hitting like I had to in League, as opposed to HOTS, where you just sit in the lane and soak the experience. I also like that it's not as it's snowbally, but it's like objective snowbally. Whereas, you know, you give up 3 kills in League at the beginning of the game, the next 30 minutes you're eating shit.
Yeah, and it's not to one character. Like in League, if you mess up, you can end up with one character just going through totally demolishing everybody, even if the rest of the team isn't doing well. Where yes, you can get team level advantages in HOTS, but it's not like it's so detrimental you can't come back from that.
Exactly. I like HOTS for that. Actually,
and not having to go shopping. You don't have. It's like in League, even though everyone knows exactly what to buy because they go read someone else's post online, but with HOTS, it's like you don't have to go in there and you're like,
no, you just build your character with talents, and that's I like that approach. I wish they would make a fighting game. I feel like a Blizzard fighting game with all those IP characters would just be fucking nuts.
It's funny because when you were talking about DC, I was also thinking about their MMO. When I saw that coming out, I was like, this looks fun. And
then died out.
You play it for a month, and it's the same thing. And you're like, man, what's going? Especially when something like City of Heroes had such a decent run for a long time. Yes, it never exploded, but it had a really good run for a while.
Yeah,
and no one else was able to copy that.
No, it was fun. It was fun. Games have to have a soul. You know, games have to have a soul. Mortal Kombat versus Injustice. Mortal Kombat has a soul. Injustice really doesn't. You know, there's a lineage, there's a heritage to Mortal Kombat. Injustice was the new kid on the block, and to be honest, I feel like they used Injustice as a test bed for Mortal Kombat at times.
It's sad too. I liked some of the Mugen versions of DC characters better than Injustice.
Yeah. Also, they kind of blurred the line in Injustice. There's a lot of characters that can pretty much put you in situations where you have to play defense and guess and continue to guess, and the reward for them is retarded. You know, they take your whole life bar, and you're like, one of the running jokes with Firestorm is it's a nice full gray bar you have there as a life lead. Shame if I'd hit you with a level 3 trait. You know, it's so that in that regard, yeah. I feel like DC as a whole has not figured out how to, outside of their animated division, how to give life to their franchises. They have no soul. The day they figure that out is the day we finally get a decent Superman movie and Justice League movie, and maybe a Green Lantern movie, because the first one didn't happen. If you watch Deadpool 2.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the last thing I want to ask you about was it's kind of connected to this thing with Mobile Legends. I played the game and I thought it was fine. But what was funny to me is I started off with the character. I forgot her name, but she's basically a gun shooting distance DPS character, and I was able to like destroy people pretty easy on it. But then I realized something. I was like, this is a phone game, first of all. So it's like, I mean, there's always been the PC versus console gamer wars, which is funny, but whatever. But then it's like anything like a flash game or a mobile game, that was like even in the back. Like they threw that like the redhead stepchild. It was like, oh, you play that or whatever. That's not you. They'd even question if you're a gamer. But you see now that these have esports in a phone game, and I'm just thinking, how does that really work? Because it's like your phone could dictate how good you are. I mean, I guess the same things with a computer, but the thing is that I guess I don't know how that would work. Like in competition, if you went there, I guess you'd what? Everyone would give you a specific sponsored phone. Like they're like, okay, this is sponsored by the Samsung Galaxy 9.
Yeah.
Because some of the reasons I see, like sometimes I'll destroy people in that game and I'll be like, well, for all I know, they went AFK because they got a text or their phone is slow or their internet connection is slow. Where it's like in other games, I feel you don't have as many issues that can cause that. I guess overall what I'm asking is, are you an esports player legit if you're playing only mobile games?
So that it's not loaded at all, actually. I will give you the easiest answer. I believe the number one played game right now, if I'm not mistaken, that has the highest amount of people playing it still. I think it's Clash of Clans. I think Clash of Clans
It's up there. I know for sure.
has the most people playing it at all times. I don't think any other game has more people playing it than Clash of Clans. And they have esports tournaments for it. So the answer is no, you are an esports player. You're just on the go.
But do you think it hurts you playing with a phone though? Because it's like there's so much. I guess it's a computer too. I mean, you have a slow computer, you have a terrible internet connection, it impacts things. It just seems with phones, especially the way phones are so designed to get you to get a new model every year. It just seems like so many people could be at a disadvantage if they got the free LG phone that comes with most plans instead of going for the Galaxy 9 or the Apple whatever number they're on now.
Well, if you're a professional Clash of Clans player, you need to stream it, get sponsored, and get that Samsung sponsorship, and get that badass Galaxy S9. You know,
I guess it's like anything else. It's about getting the right hardware. You have the right headset, the right controller, keyboard, mouse.
if you believe you're a badass, I think your segue into getting a phone is a lot easier than building a big rig.
That's true. That is true.
So all you got to do is just go get yourself the badass new phone under contract. Take it out on your grandma's name if you have to.
That'll be the new controversy. Esports champion has account in grandma's name.
Yeah. This 87-year-old woman is destroying people in Clash of Clans. What is this?
All right, so this was the first All F4 from a long time. We're going to be coming back with more episodes, and we're also going to talk to more pro gamers because I mean that was fun back in the day in our previous incarnation of the show, talking to them. But we also want to cover more of just in the industry, what's going on, who's making money, who's doing shady shit, all that stuff. But Josh, thanks for coming on again and helping navigate me through this, man.
It's good to be here. It's good to be back. At least I didn't permanently hit all F4 and not come back.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. We may hit all F4, but we will return. And we really appreciate you guys for watching and listening to us either on YouTube or on the podcast. But until next time, remember our motto, never stop gaming. Thanks.
Unless you want to rage quit.
That's right. But come back. Just go
come back
out.
anyway. Take a breather.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Later.